Kathy had always been someone who appreciated fashion, not just for appearance, but for the way clothing could influence confidence and comfort. She had a particular appreciation for lingerie and sleepwear because she believed the right fabrics and designs could make a person feel relaxed and elegant at the same time. After she began dating Trey, she quickly discovered that he shared many of the same interests. Although their tastes were not identical, they both enjoyed exploring different styles, learning about clothing, and discovering what made certain pieces special. They were both in their early 20s and had recently finished college, entering a new stage of life where they were learning more about themselves and each other. One of their favorite ways to spend time together was visiting clothing stores, walking through different sections, and discussing everything from colors and materials to the details behind certain designs. For Kathy, shopping had always been a creative experience, and she enjoyed having someone beside her who was genuinely interested rather than simply waiting for the trip to end. Whenever Kathy visited her favorite boutiques, Trey happily came along. At first, he joined mostly because he enjoyed spending time with her, but over time he became more curious about the fashion world itself. He started paying attention to the differences between fabrics, noticing how certain materials felt softer or more comfortable, and understanding why people preferred specific styles. Kathy was surprised by how naturally interested he became. What began as simple shopping outings slowly turned into something they both looked forward to. Instead of being just another activity they did together, exploring fashion became a shared hobby. Trey started realizing that clothing was not only about appearance or following expectations. It was also about comfort, personal taste, and finding things that matched a person's lifestyle. As their relationship grew, Kathy noticed that Trey was especially drawn to clothing made from soft, comfortable materials. He appreciated the same qualities she valued: lightweight fabrics, thoughtful designs, and pieces that allowed someone to feel at ease. Although he had never really considered himself someone who cared deeply about fashion, he began discovering that he enjoyed the experience more than he expected. One evening, while the two of them were relaxing at home, Kathy casually suggested that Trey try a silky sleepwear set similar to one she enjoyed wearing. At first, he was unsure. The idea felt unfamiliar, and he wondered whether it would feel strange. However, after some encouragement, he decided to give it a chance. To his surprise, the experience was completely different from what he imagined. The fabric felt comfortable, smooth, and relaxing. Instead of focusing on what the clothing was traditionally associated with, he found himself noticing the practical side of it: the softness, the fit, and how comfortable it felt after a long day. That small experience changed the way Trey looked at clothing. He became more willing to explore different styles instead of immediately rejecting something because it was outside his usual choices. Kathy appreciated that he was open-minded, and Trey began to understand that personal comfort did not always have to follow traditional expectations. Over the following months, their interest in fashion continued to develop. They visited stores together, compared different materials, discussed designs, and shared opinions about what made certain pieces appealing. Trey gradually became more confident in expressing what he liked and what he did not like. Rather than worrying about how others might judge his choices, he began focusing on what actually made him feel comfortable. The more he explored, the more he realized that clothing did not have to be limited by assumptions. A person could appreciate a garment because of its quality, design, or comfort without needing to attach a specific meaning to it. During one warm summer afternoon, Kathy introduced Trey to lightweight camisoles made from breathable fabrics. She explained that many people enjoyed wearing them because they were practical, comfortable, and suitable for warmer weather. Trey was curious and decided to try one for himself. After wearing it, he quickly understood why Kathy liked similar styles. The material was comfortable, the design was simple, and it worked well for relaxing at home. The experience helped him move away from thinking about clothing categories and toward thinking about individual pieces based on their actual purpose and how they felt. Kathy admired the confidence Trey was developing. She was happy that he was becoming more comfortable expressing his preferences instead of feeling pressured to follow expectations created by other people. For her, the most important thing was that he felt secure and accepted. As time passed, friends and family members began noticing changes in Trey's wardrobe. Some were surprised, while others were simply curious. Most importantly, the people close to him recognized that he seemed happier and more relaxed than before. His sister Kim was especially supportive. She noticed that Trey appeared more comfortable with himself and commented that confidence mattered far more than clothing choices. She believed that people should have the freedom to enjoy what made them feel good without constantly worrying about outside opinions. One afternoon, Kathy and Trey visited a large lingerie store where their friend Tammy worked. While Kathy looked through new arrivals and examined different designs, Trey walked around the store with genuine curiosity. Instead of feeling uncomfortable, he found himself interested in the craftsmanship, fabrics, and variety of styles available. Tammy noticed his interest and started a conversation with him about fashion. They discussed how different people have different preferences and how clothing can be a form of personal expression. Trey explained that he enjoyed certain pieces because they were comfortable, well-designed, and enjoyable to wear. Both Kathy and Tammy encouraged him to continue exploring whatever styles interested him. They reminded him that clothing was ultimately a personal choice and that confidence came from feeling comfortable with himself. As Trey became more familiar with fashion, shopping became something he actively enjoyed rather than something he only participated in for Kathy. He learned about measurements, materials, construction techniques, and the details that separate ordinary clothing from carefully designed pieces. Instead of feeling embarrassed, he began appreciating the freedom that came with choosing clothing based on his own preferences. He realized that fashion was not simply a collection of rules. It was a way for people to express personality, creativity, and comfort. Looking back, Kathy understood that their journey had never truly been about clothing alone. The experience was about trust, acceptance, and allowing each other the freedom to be genuine. Trey had become more comfortable with himself, and their relationship had grown stronger because they supported each other's individuality. Together, they continued discovering new styles and encouraging each other to embrace what felt right. For both of them, the most meaningful part of the journey was not any particular outfit they purchased, but the understanding that they could always be honest about who they were. The decision was completely his to make. No one pressured him, and no one expected him to choose a certain path. After standing there for a while, thinking about all the doubts and questions running through his mind, Trey finally decided that he wanted to experience something new. He took a chance and allowed himself to step beyond the boundaries he had always placed around his own choices. When he looked at himself in the mirror, the feeling that surprised him most was not that he appeared different. Instead, he was struck by the realization that he was seeing a side of himself he had never previously given permission to exist. The reflection was still him, but it represented a version of himself that was more open, more curious, and less controlled by fear of judgment. The moment was not about transforming into someone else or abandoning who he had always been. It was about understanding that a person can have many different sides, interests, and expressions without losing their true identity. Trey began to realize that the image he had carried for years was only one small part of who he really was. When he returned to the others, their reactions were exactly what he needed. They smiled because they could see the confidence growing within him. Their happiness did not come from wanting him to become someone different. It came from seeing him become more comfortable accepting himself. They appreciated the courage it took for him to explore something unfamiliar and respected that the choice belonged entirely to him. For the remainder of the day, Trey noticed a change in the way he felt. A weight that he had carried for a long time seemed to disappear. He was no longer constantly thinking about how others might react or whether he was meeting expectations created by society. Instead, he was simply enjoying the experience of learning more about himself. For the first time in a long while, he felt free to be curious without immediately questioning whether his choices were acceptable. He stopped focusing on labels and started focusing on what genuinely made him comfortable and confident. The experience became less about the clothing itself and more about the freedom that came with making his own decisions. As the weeks and months continued, Trey kept exploring different aspects of fashion and personal style. His wardrobe became a reflection of his changing confidence and his willingness to experiment. Some days he chose classic outfits that matched the style he had always worn. Other days, He found himself interested in pieces that felt softer, more artistic, or simply different from what he had previously considered. There was no pressure for him to follow one specific style. He learned that personal expression does not have to fit into a single category. Preferences can change depending on mood, comfort, occasion, and personal taste. What mattered most was that every choice came from his own feelings rather than from fear of criticism. Throughout this process, Kathy remained supportive. She encouraged him to continue discovering what worked for him and reminded him that confidence came from being honest with himself. Kim also continued to support him, appreciating that Trey seemed happier and more relaxed than before. His friends noticed the same thing. The more comfortable he became with himself, the more natural and confident he appeared. However, the most important support Trey gained was the support he learned to give himself. He no longer needed constant reassurance from others because he had started trusting his own judgment. He realized that personal confidence was built by accepting every part of himself, including the parts he had once been afraid to explore. The journey that began with something as simple as clothing eventually became a much deeper lesson about identity, acceptance, and self-expression. Trey discovered that style was not about proving anything to anyone. It was about finding what felt authentic and meaningful to him. He learned that happiness does not come from perfectly matching someone else's expectations. It comes from understanding yourself and having the freedom to make choices that reflect who you truly are. In the end, the experience changed far more than his wardrobe. It changed the way he viewed himself. Trey became someone who was more confident, more open-minded, and more willing to embrace the different parts of his personality. The outfits were only a small part of the story. The real transformation came from realizing that he did not need permission to be himself. Confidence came from self-acceptance, and that lesson remained with him long after the clothes themselves no longer mattered.